Good evening. I'm Scott Allen. I'm the principal at Kinder High School for the Performing and Visual Arts in the Houston Independent School District. And I'd like to welcome you to our evening of discussing race and culture at HSPVA. A lot has happened in the last few months, and I thought it would be a great idea to have a conversation and invite some students to share their perspectives and tell their stories so that we could make some decisions moving forward as to how we could do better as far as race relations at our school. So at this time, I would like to introduce Kyra Hardwick. Kyra is a best-selling author. She's a business developer, a managing consultant, and she's the founder and CEO of the Kyra Company. She is an effective communicator with a knack for developing cohesive and productive teams. She has an MBA with a concentration in human resources. And I have had the honor of visiting with Kyra over the summer, and she's been a huge resource and just become a mentor to sorts for me. So Kyra, I'm so excited you're here tonight and taking part in the time together with some of our kids. So thank you for joining us.
Dr. Allen, thank you so much for having me. And it has too been my pleasure to have a dynamic dialogue, not only with you, really supporting the messaging that's necessary as we start to look at what our campus looks like now, right? What are the culture and dynamic conversations we're having around race, but also to really drive home some messaging that you've been kind enough to share with us and letting us know just how important this conversation is. And so I'm excited not only to be a parent, to be a supporter of HSPVA, but also a huge supporter of conversations like this that disrupt norms and create lots of dynamics for our students to thrive in. So let's have a conversation for a moment, Dr. Allen. You know, why is this conversation really, really important to PVA tonight? Why is it important that we have it?
Well, I think, Kyra, over the last few months, we know that there have been events across our country that have just thrust this issue into the spotlight. And our kids were off at summer, and as they come back, I think it's important for us to be ready for the conversations that need to be had. I think as a leader, it's given me a chance to really reflect on some of the things that we do and that are happening at the school, and knowing that we can do better, knowing that we can be there for our kids and make sure that their voices are heard and really listen. And so I think that this is the first step in making that happen.
I think one of the most powerful words you used in that response, amongst all words, was better. And knowing that we can do better. We can do better as a collective. We can do better as individuals. And I'm excited tonight because we have 10 students that we'll hear from that have decided that doing better, and hashtag change at PVA, use that hashtag tonight. That is our students have customized that hashtag for us tonight. So change at PVA to really drive home the better opportunity that we have to make sure that there is equity in race and equity in the understanding and appreciation of culture. Let me ask this question, because a lot of opportunity to have conversation has come up for a lot of us on different platforms. But what are we going to do once our students share their thoughts tonight? What are we going to do with that? What is the next step after tonight?
So, Kyra, I think that's an interesting question. And of course, in my mind, I have this idea of where we're going. And I think that tonight could very much change that. Like what I hear from the kids and what they share with us is what will really drive the next steps. But in my mind, I think we need to listen to the stories, listen to the perspectives, and get the opinions of these students. And eventually we will also ask those things of parents. And then I think that we need to categorize and prioritize. There are probably 15 to 20 things that we need to do better at HSPVA, but I think we need to really focus on the 5 or 6 things that are most important and figure out an action plan on how we move forward. I don't think this is an overnight fix, but I think that we have to come together, and it has to be voices of all stakeholders as we decide how we move forward. And my hope is that we can figure out those 4, 5, 6 areas that by the end of this semester, by the end of December, beginning of January, we're able to say, this is how we're going to do things differently to make change at the school.
That's a big deal. And I will say this, the most important thing we can do to become better is to take the action. And knowing the dialogue we've had leading up to this moment, I'm clear that action is a part of our function and our intention going forward. And I want to say that as we start to hear from our students tonight, knowing that at the heart of this matter for you is that their voices are heard, and that we're clear that we want to take the right types of actions to create better access to opportunities. We want to make sure that there is an equity in enrollment. We want to make sure that there is equity when it comes to staff and faculty and exposure. We want to look like the culture that we represent on campus, that we represent in the talent and in the arts, and our creatives deserve that. And so I'm excited about tonight, Dr. Allen. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to host this dialogue with these amazing students. And so what I like to do is invite our students to the front row of this stage, or to center stage, let me say that, so we can start to have this conversation. So I'm inviting Joshua Garvin to the conversation, Alisar Youssef, Kirsten Gillum, Niara Singleton, and Avalon Hogans. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the conversation. We're glad to have you. Dr. Allen, we're so grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to have a private conversation. You can take a look at it on the other side. We're going to talk about race and culture tonight with these 5 superstars, and we'll be back with another set as well later on. And so, Dr. Allen, I'll see you in just a moment. Good evening, you all. How are you?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Good.
Great.
Doing good, yes.
Fantastic. We're excited to have you, and we're going to get down to business because you all were brave enough to respond to the call and say, you know what, I want my voice to be heard, and I'd love to share in this conversation. And so I'm going to ask you all a question, and I'll reach out specifically to who it is I want to answer that question. So as we're moving through this conversation, as it's coming to you, I want you to be ready to share it. The goal here, as you heard Dr. Allen say, is that your voice is heard. And tonight we get to do that, and you get to share that with our HSPVA community of parents, of students, and supporters. So let's jump right in. So the first question I have, it's a question for everyone. And so Joshua, if you could kick us off by answering this question. My question is, why did you say yes to being a part of the conversation, Joshua?
I said yes to this conversation because I think there are just too many people saying no. There are too many people saying no to the change that is very long overdue. Saying no to this, changing the system where we as Black people and people of color have been suffering only because they are living comfortably in it. And I think that's just a selfish move. So I just think it's time to uncover all thresholds and make a pathway for us all to live comfortably and truly live free. Because right now the word free doesn't mean free, at least for me.
Wow, thank you, Joshua, for that feedback. I'm going to ask Alisar, share your thoughts. Why did you say yes?
I said yes to being a part of this discussion because I thought it was an opportunity for me to finally be heard and taken seriously with my perspective. At PVA, we're taught history through the perspective of the oppressed, and if we're going to be a school that prides itself on diversity, then we need to be able to, I think, openly discuss these issues that are occurring to people of color. And I think I really wanted to be a part of this discussion as a minority myself.
It's such a brave conversation for us to have. You know, even adults, this is a brave conversation for us to have. And so I can only imagine, as scholars, as creatives, as students, as community members, as someone's child, you have decided that you wanted your voice to be heard, and you're taking such an incredible stand. So I want to say, just as we keep moving through this conversation, thank you for being bold and courageous tonight. And as Joshua said, let's say yes to this conversation and more like it. So we're going to ask you, Avalon. Avalon, why did you say yes to this conversation tonight?
I said yes to this conversation tonight because I view it as not only an important one, but a very necessary one to have at PVA, because I know that there's certain encounters or injustices going on at school that everyone may not know about. So I think it's important that we have our voices be heard and make these injustices be aware of, because we all really need to get on the same page here in order to make a change and take action.
That's big. That's big. And I think you and Alisar stated it real well to say it's your chance to say what your experience is and what's been done and what needs to be done. So as you all are thinking through, some of the experiences you have, and we're going to get into that a bit and talk about some things around bias and what biases are. But we're gonna get into that, and I'm excited to even hear more. So Niara, why did you say yes?
I said yes because all of my friends and everyone I talk to has the same beliefs. We all believe in the same thing. But in order for there to be change, we have to actually force change in our communities. And at a school like PVA, we do have a lot of different experiences that are for the better. But just because of that privilege in itself doesn't mean that it's over, and there's always more that we can do. And this is the place to start because we're all involved and this is our lives and our experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that. And HSPVA is certainly a dynamic space to grow, learn, and be educated and to master your art. And what I didn't say and share is, Joshua, you are in the vocal department, Alisar theater, Kristen visual arts, and Niara theater, and we're going to meet, and Avalon creative writing. So thank you all too. You're representing your art departments, and I am sure thus far they're excited about the way that you're representing them tonight. Kirsten, please share, why did you say yes to this conversation?
Personally, like what Avalon said, I also feel like it's a very important conversation to be had and bring light of the things that really affect people but aren't spoken actively.
That's big, and we're going to jump right into that. And so what I'm hearing you all say is there are things that you've experienced. There are moments that you've had, but you've had it, and you're not certain that everybody understands what your experience has been from a race and culture perspective. So let me ask this question, and I'm going to ask this question first of Alisar. Alisar, the question I have for you is, how has race and culture impacted your time at PVA?
Well, I am a first generation Lebanese American, and I was excited getting into PVA because we are known for being a very diverse school. So I was excited to meet kids of different backgrounds and hopefully meet other individuals like me. But I found that I didn't meet my form of community of other Arabs. I even joined the Middle Eastern Club, and ironically enough, I was the only Arab in the Middle Eastern Club. And though I was excited that this club existed, for example, to bring awareness to the issues that are occurring in the Middle East, we weren't able to accomplish much. And I wasn't able to meet individuals like me who shared similar experiences. And even being like in the theater department, my background and my race isn't represented, as it isn't as prominent. And it's been seen in other shows as well with other racial backgrounds that they've happened to be passed off as having white leads, for example, and not being properly culturally represented. And I felt the same way, knowing that the Middle East will not be fully represented, as it's also been only recently been included in the Asian Pacific Festival. So even before then, it wasn't represented in the diversity series.
Now, let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Alisar, because that was a huge statement that you just made. And I think that, Joshua, I'm coming to you next, that's a big conversation and representation, right? When you think about how big your voice is tonight and you being able to say, listen, my culture really does have a place here, and we want to have more visual, we want to visualize that much more than what we have right now. So what other opportunities can we create? Are you prepared, Alisar, to really be vocal on campus amongst your peers and have this conversation and really bring change to this?
Absolutely. I think along with my culture not being, I think, properly represented, I think there's a lot of stereotypes that are being perpetuated by non-people of color students as well, especially when it comes to just talking about individuals and other students and debating on what form of religion or culture they practice, instead of properly asking them to their face and being respectful about their curiosity about the culture. like debating on if me and other Arab students are, for example, Muslim, and instead of asking us directly, they talk about it behind our backs and debate about it as if it's a topic that they should discuss on their own. And I think being able to talk about how it's okay to be curious about our culture, but to come to us directly so you don't perpetuate a stereotype of non-Arab Muslims or non-Muslim Arabs being all the same. That way we can fully understand the diversity that is within the Middle East, for example, and be able to have a more open conversation about that in classes too, when learning about the history about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Joshua, I'm going to ask you, when you think about what Alisar just stated, have you experienced similar, moments, while at PVA that have really kind of been a mirror of hers, where there are stereotypes that are reflected instead of someone directly asking you or getting connected to you to understand better your perspective or your religion, things like that?
Absolutely. I think the most I see this is sometimes inside of my own department or sometimes in the classroom as well. Most of the time since my freshman year, I've had a class where I've been the only Black person. For you to say that you joined the Middle Eastern Club and to be the only Arab is really big. So when we go in vocal, when we sing these like spirituals, or if we sing a song, then all of a sudden I'm expected to kind of lead this, or we're expected to lead this example or be the example of the choir all of a sudden, just because no one else has took the time to educate themselves to appreciate music, to be able to even be able to sing the song. So all of a sudden I'm just expected to be this Black boy who knows every gospel song, who knows every song my ancestors sang on their way to freedom, and I think that's really huge.
Let me ask this, Joshua. That's a big deal. And that's not the first time that, I'm sure any of us have heard that or maybe even experienced it. But that is a big deal. And so let's talk about cultural context, because that's really what you just brought to the light, right? As we really think about that, the expectation that if it's a Black thing, then you by all means, because you're Black, you should know, or you should be the authority on it if there are very few that represent. And Niara, I'm coming to you after Joshua with this question, but to help me understand, do you believe, or have you had conversation even with your white counterparts or your non-Black counterparts or non-diverse, non-minority counterparts to say, what kind of work and study have you put in to make sure that you're ready for this performance, if it is indeed going to portray more Black culture than it would non-Black culture? Have you had those conversations, Joshua?
Sometimes we try, and I think as Black people, like especially for me, like I will ask or I'll say something, but then people kind of like shoot you down, or you try to come off in a way to where you're not being pushy or too hard on them, or to a way for them to make you seem critical, because so often as a Black male I can come off that way to society just because they painted that picture as me. But when I say that things, I'm just truly asking because I for one think artistry can't be done until you've done the work, until you've cleared your mind and really focused in on the art piece and connected to the story. And I think that's where we draw the line between appreciation and appropriation, and which is why we're able to sing and dance and create and write to so a broad horizon of so many things if we really connect and do the history. And when I've like asked these people, the answer is mostly no, because in school we're not like, we don't have to do that. But when we get a white song, Italian song, or if we're in a history class, then we all of a sudden have to do those, and that's great. But so my culture is never reflected in school enough to do,
The real
to
work.
even care enough. It's just used as kind of like a party trick, right?
Joshua, that's a huge statement, and I'm taking particular note, and I understood the words that you said. It's the difference of appreciation and appropriation, and that's a big conversation, and that is a national, it's a global dialogue that we're having right there around that, and I think that we've really brought that in. So Niara, let me ask you, because I'm sure very similar to Alisar and Joshua's statements, I want to understand from you the same. What's been your experience, and have you had any experiences where you've noticed the biases projected onto you as it relates to you being a Black student at PVA. What's been that experience for you? Go ahead and there you go.
In the theater department, there's like an unspoken separation between each race when it comes to different roles. Like, I was surprised to hear how many of my Black friends they chose not to choose certain monologues from certain shows because they didn't feel comfortable playing a character that's mostly played by white women or white men when there's barely any racial context. And I find that used to happen a lot, and it's just sad to see that it's taken us 2 years for us to actually be comfortable for going for roles that we felt comfortable with. And thankfully we have Miss McNeil, who's always pushing us to choose anything that we want and to actually break barriers where barriers don't have to be, but somehow they are.
No, great point. And I think having a champion and an advocate that helps you break through some of those barriers that you've put on because of the environment or ideas that you have or what your peers may be saying. I think it's important to have champions that drive us a little bit further. Avalon, I'm going to ask you this. As a leader in this conversation tonight, and we talked about this, you saying yes to this opportunity immediately makes you a leader and a catalyst for making sure that hashtag change at PVA is a part of our entire idea around what we're doing this year, what we're doing going forward. As a leader in this conversation tonight, are you committed, to really doing the work to create change at PVA? And as you're answering that question, help us understand what it is that you're hoping to see happen as a result of this conversation.
Yes, I am very committed to trying to make more of an active change at PVA. I think on a more personal level, something I've been trying to work on is being more proactive as opposed to reactive in responses to microaggressions and stereotypes and gaslighting and stuff like that. I think one change that I really want to see is maybe just less of the microaggressions and stereotypes. I know a lot of you were saying that you feel as if your culture or your race is underrepresented in your departments, and I can relate to that too. And I feel like because of that underrepresentation, I often feel pressured to speak up against the microaggressions because really no one else will. So
give us an example of what microaggressions you've experienced. It's just kind of a pictorial so that we can walk with you. You're in creative writing, and help us understand that from your perspective.
Okay. So with microaggressions, I feel like there are some that are less harmful and some that are more harmful, or at least to me personally. I think one of the more harmful ones that I've experienced is some of my peers or friends joking around and name calling or making remarks about my hair or stereotyping. I've been called an Oreo before because of well, I'm sure y'all know what that means, but I have a...
What does that mean?
Oreo? That's kind of it's not really a slur, but it's a name that people are called when they are Black but seem to act white, supposedly. So I've been called that before, and I feel like that kind of shows a bias towards anti-Blackness.
Absolutely. I think we spoke to kind of perception and cultural context around who we are and what we are. We're all very different. And Kirsten, thank you, Avalon, for breaking that down for us and for your transparency, because it is a big deal and it's a big conversation, and name calling is a part of what we've all experienced in some way when we're thinking about, how people approach us, whether it's behind our back, as Avalon and Joshua have talked about, or if it's, Alizar, or if it's in front of our face and we see it and we either decide to address it or we decide to walk away. Those are all very real experiences that you all have shared. And so, Kirsten, let me ask you this. You represent the visual arts, and that means we get to see and experience your creative genius in living color, right? And so help us understand, Kirsten, from your experience, What do you think the impact is of biases at PVA overall? What do you believe the impact is, and how do you believe the student body, responds to biases at overall?
Personally, within my department, I think, well, it stems into the arts in general, that Black people should create more art based on their own culture and where they come from. And that is just a lot of what goes on in the department. Like, if you're Black, you make a specific kind of art, which I sort of stray from in that area. But yeah.
Kirsten, that's huge what you just said, and I'm going to dig into that a little bit. If you can allow me another minute or two with you on this. When you say that, and you all can nod your heads if you've experienced that, where someone thinks because you're Black or because you're Middle Eastern that you should do a certain type of work. Kirsten, help us understand maybe a scenario or an experience you've had with that, and then what was your response, and how did you creatively respond to that?
It's less of what I've experienced and more of what I've noticed. Like, there's certain scholarships or certain like specific art competitions where it's geared towards Black people, but relating to their culture or where they come from. And that's not the kind of art that I do, so I have to sort of work around that in a way.
That's a big deal, and I want to open up this last question, and we're gonna go into part 2 of this conversation. But have you all experienced in some way maybe feeling like you have to be forced into doing it that way, doing art in a way that's specific to your culture? And I know as you think about doing and being in the arts in the world overall in your craft, that's not necessarily the way that the arts take form. So let me ask you all this, and you can kind of let us know. You can unmute your mic. Have you felt like you've ever been forced into a space where you could only do, a certain kind of work, and how have you resisted that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Bachelor.
Yes, I think for me as a Black male, it's the other way around. They don't want me singing gospel. They don't want me singing blues. They don't want me singing jazz, because for me, it's really bad for your voice. So I need to come in and sing this song to cater to them, to do this. And that was, oh my gosh, angelic. But the minute I start singing something that I really love and connect to, it doesn't really tone well to me.
Alisar, what's been your experience with that?
So I've never been pushed into that stereotype, I believe, of being forced to do my craft centered around my culture. However, I've had experiences when, for example, when it came to finding monologues for theater, usually you want to find a monologue that you can personally connect with from your real life so you can empathize with it and have a genuine reaction to it. And whenever I found any form of monologues or plays with Arab characters in it, it was very stereotypical. And if it represented, for example, like a bilingual individual, they would speak in ways that someone who is bilingual wouldn't talk. It's very unnatural, very stereotypical, and it'd be very difficult for me in that area in theater to find a piece that I could truly connect with to my culture. And so I often had to stray away from it because I didn't have such an open, I think, like,
thank you for that.
I didn't have as
Thank
many
you for that.
options.
Niara, what's been your experience there?
I feel like I was never really forced to play a certain stereotype, but I always felt bad for naturally just never being, like I'm in musical theater, so never having like the most soulful gospel Black sounding voice. And whenever I wanted to do something that was more classically musical theater, I never felt like super comfortable for it, because you always have an idea of who that should be. So there's never like any confidence of like someone like me playing a certain role when who, if someone is white and they already sound like that and you see it in your head already, you're kind of up against like the biggest competition ever. just because of your environment.
Thank you for that, Niara. And Avalon, we'll wrap with you. What's been your experience there?
I feel like with creative writing, it's a lot of like freedom based on what you really want to work on. So I feel like I haven't really been forced into creating like a certain art, but I will say there have been experiences where like certain projects, like I remember freshman year, one of my friends wanted to do the Black Arts Movement in poetry class, and they asked me to help them since I'm Black. So I feel like that was a time where I wasn't really forced to do it, but that was a time where I guess was asked to.
So
Yeah.
in those instances, still showing the value of culture and your connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
Understood. Well, I'm going to tell you all right now, as this conversation continues, I am incredibly proud to be able to have this conversation with you, Joshua, Alisar, Avalon, Niara, and Kirsten. You've done a fantastic job kicking this dialogue off. We're going to bring Dr. Allen back on as we prepare to have the second part 2 of this conversation of race and culture, #change at PVA with our students. Thank you all so much. Dr. Allen, welcome back.
Thank you, Kyra. They're amazing. And I'm like sitting here and I'm like, but say this, ask this, like extend. And I know we have a limited amount of time, but their voices are so strong.
I mean, beyond, understanding. And I'm wondering when I was in 10th and 11th grade and 12th grade, okay, no, I'm not going to ask that question because I was that vocal, I was in drama, and I was that theater kid. So maybe I'll just retract my statement. So yes, I was.
And Kyra, I think that for the most part, all of our kids are old souls. And I think that anytime that we have conversations with them one-on-one, I always have to remind myself that they're high school students. It's sort of like there's such knowledge, and I just love that. And they just all showed that again this evening. So
I'm going to say this, Dr. Allen, when Joshua said appropriation of versus appreciation, that was such a dynamic point to make. And I think we could all appreciate that across the spectrum of this conversation. And so I'm going to make sure that becomes a constant in our conversation, because I want us to make sure that as we're making sure we have access to programs that meet the needs of our students and give them the appropriate kind of intro into the arts in the big world of the arts, right? That we do it well. And I want us to really think about that, Dr. Allen, as we're thinking about the next steps post-conversation. So I'm going to bring in the next set of students, and I'd like to invite Kale Wan over. Yes, here we are. You're coming
all right. Well, hi.
All right, Kale. We're going to bring Dion Bringsey, Amira, Jalen, and Tobias. We're glad to have you on. Awesome. Welcome. Whether or not, we're here, everyone. Welcome to the conversation. Dr. Allen, anything you want to share with the students before part 2? Dr. Allen, anything you'd like to share?
I will say what I said to the first group. Thank you guys for being here. I think you're courageous and brave, and I can't wait to hear your perspectives and your stories. And I know that you'll be honest. So break a leg, and I'll see you at the other side.
Well, first of all, I have a room full of seniors, so kudos to tipping my crown to you, wonderful, wonderful students. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the conversation. And the comments are coming up. I'm very excited to see this conversation from Comlet. Savannah says, this is the conversation we need. Great job. And we're excited to do this. So we're going to jump right in. If you all aren't excited, I am. And I've had part 1 with some amazing students, and we're going to do the just on this side. So let me first ask the same question that I asked of all of them jumping into this conversation, which is this: why did you say yes to being a part of this conversation? So Kale, I'm going to start it off with you. Why did you say yes?
Well, honestly, I said yes because I'm tired of waiting for someone else to make the next move. It's just day in, day out of, oh, someone else will speak up, someone else will speak up. And lately, a lot of people have been speaking up, and it's been really interesting to see how I don't like the word woke, but how racially aware people have been in the past few months, and it's a real good change to see. And I felt like if those people can come out of their shells as much as they have, then I can as well. And so here I am.
Fantastic. I'm going to say this. It's almost like we can't avoid the conversation. So if you didn't want to have it,
yeah,
we're having
You're
it
gonna
now.
have to have it.
We're having it now. Dion, what's your thoughts? So tell me why, Dion, why did you say yes?
I said yes because I really like this opportunity to give the underdogs, per se, a chance to tell their stories and their experiences, because I feel like a lot of times students are afraid to stand up and say, hey, this is what's happening to me and this is what's going on at our school and under this roof. So I feel like we're given a chance to actually let people know this is how we feel and we're willing to do something to change it.
That's a great point. And I'm going to ask this, Dion, do you feel like in some way this is your way to leave your mark and to mark legacy here? All right. Okay. I felt that. I don't know what it was that you said or did, but I immediately felt like you were like, this was my opportunity to really be heard and make a mark at PVA. And I think that's amazing. And I saw some of the alum chiming in earlier in the comments, and they're excited and they're proud. And so much more of this to come. So we're going to jump in. So Jalen, why did you say yes?
I agreed to this because I wanted to be a part of the conversation. I feel like there's a lot that I could contribute to this with speaking out on things that I have seen done to others, including myself. I won't lie, however, I do feel a little scared that there might be repercussions for the topics that we do speak out on because they are uncomfortable to talk about, but it needs to be said.
Absolutely. And when we talked in our preparation, this is a brave, bold conversation to have. It's a brave, bold conversation for me to have. And so to have it in position where we talked about the fact that you all will now stand up as leaders, whether you wanted to be in front or not, you're now a leader. And as a leader in this conversation, the other obligation or the burden we now wear is accountability. And so just as much as we're going to talk about things that we've experienced, what you do, how you act, what you say, how you respond, what your biases are, they're now going to be very visible and people are going to see them on 10 now because you're speaking up against it. And so the accountability that we want to impress at PVA is equally impressed upon you as an individual. Do you all understand the capacity of that? That's a big deal. Okay, Tobias, why did you say yes?
I said yes because right now, especially in our social climate, it's important and like we need to have these conversations and actually force change to happen. And I think it starts within our communities. And this is a perfect place to start where we actually make good on our promise that we're all inclusive and that we are sensitive to each other's feelings. So I think this was a perfect place to start. Yeah.
I love that, Tobias. The power of making good on your promise. That's big. So there's legacy. There's a requirement for us to be vocal about it because it is us. And the other side of this thing is that we're going to make good on a promise, and a promise kept, right, is going to be realized for years and years and years to come. And so this is a huge way for us to make that initial step. So Amira, let's hear it. Tell me your why.
So basically, I want this message to be brought out to different groups outside of our school. Because I feel like, yes, we're speaking here on change about our school, but I wish for this topic to also go into workspaces, into families, and also just social groups, so we could all have this comfortable feeling about race, and it's not as much as a touchy topic to non-Black people or people of color. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm gonna maybe switch it up just a little bit because I feel like you guys are a little more ready than I was anticipating. So let's have a dicey conversation. Saying Black in a room full of Black and non-Blacks, how do you feel about saying I am Black versus African American? What's your dynamic with that? Do either of you all have perspective on that? Who's nodding their head? Okay, Kale, let me know. What's your thought on that?
Well, I use both interchangeably because I'm first generation African. So my mother came to the States when she was 12. Um, and my whole family came over here due to a war. And so I identify with my African side. And so I normally tend to say African American because it's my mom's African and my father is American. So that's what I am. But Black is a word that is a little more charged, especially in a room with people who are not Black. And so it is definitely a word that you can use to get the attention of people. And so, yeah, it works in that respect. So in a conversation like this, I feel like we're all Black. We are all, yeah. Sorry.
Very dynamic way, and I'm glad I didn't know the dynamics of your background, and so I think that's important for us to understand as we appreciate the minorities that we appreciate the culture that we bring to the table. Mm-hmm. I often share with others, and I don't really talk about this much because it's not 50% of who I am, but I am an eighth, 25% percent Indian. That is a big deal for me. I don't know my history when it comes to being Native American, but I do understand that I do identify in some instances in that conversation. And so no one ever recognizes me as being something other than just Black. And so I think it's a good way for us to really jump in. Let's talk about it. We're going to kind of play with the idea around biases. So Tobias, I'm going to come to you. You represent the dance and the dance art area. And let's talk about some biases that you've experienced as a student, as a Black male dance student. What are some of the perspectives or expectations you think that people have of you?
Well, it's already so limited in our in that community where there's only ever a few of us that participate in dance.
Black males?
For Black males, yes. Okay. So especially with my background being trained as a ballet dancer, there's even fewer Black males in there in that department or that wise. So I think a lot of being Black, there's a lot of like stereotypes that come with that, with just like cultural stereotypes of being more grounded or being more, oh, you should be able to do this West African because aren't you Black? Stuff like that. So there's more of an expectation for us to pursue something less technical and less refined, as people would say, and do like we have the Alvin Ailey company and stuff like that. So do something more like on that side and leave the ballet and like the technical stuff to the white people. So now, I think it's
pause here, Tobias. Do you believe that's something that's an expectation because it's been stated to you, or something as an expectation because of the way you feel?
Maybe more of the way I feel, but also sort of just implemented, just kind of ingrained in our society and just our brains that is more of an industry run by predominantly white people. So there's just different expectations for males, and especially Black males in that industry, and just in dance in general that we have, and I think it's time to like break those barriers as well.
No, that's a huge point. I asked you to differentiate because sometimes what we do is we do form our own alignment with biases, and then there is what's implied, or you heard the whisper, or you're only assigned a certain. So that's why I asked for specifics, because at PVA we want to make sure that as we represent these art areas that we understand what's happening to the best of our ability, so we can address it in the most effective and meaningful way. And so that's a great point, Tobias. And I think it's a bit of both. And I heard you say that. It's hard to answer, but you did that masterfully. So thank you. And I'm going to go over to your dance counterpart, Dion. Dion, tell us about some things, some breakthroughs that you've experienced in the dance area where biases existed or cultural and maybe some inequities existed, but now they've been addressed or open. You guys have had open dialogue about them. Tell us about some of the great things that are happening as a result of dialogue.
Well, just this past year, every year we go over the dance rule book and the dance handbook and how we should be dressed in class and certain things. And we were going over this new section where we were able to wear flesh tone ballet shoes and point shoes to ballet class. And I got so excited because there are a lot of instances where we have to pancake our shoes, and point shoes cost a lot of money. So we want to keep using the ones we're able to use. And sometimes we weren't able to because they were flesh tone. But with this new addition to the rule book, we were able to wear these shoes and feel comfortable and not having to get a new pair and break them in all over again. And I just thought it was a big step for us, and I was really excited. And it just showed that, I mean, the little things matter. The little changes you make and the little instances where you say, hey, we hear you and we care about you and we're trying to make things better, that helps a whole bunch. Because as Tobias said, there's not a lot of us you'll see when you walk into a room. I have went to many studios where I was one of the 2 Black girls dancing there, and it was heartbreaking, but you learn to like get over those challenges and you learn to see like I deserve more. And I was just really happy when they showed us that they were listening and they cared. So
now that's a big deal, and I think you all are masters at your craft. You're mastering your craft now. So you're in school now to be supported, to be guided, to be directed, so you can master your art. And I think moments like that, Dion, where whatever it was that broke and shattered the idea that flesh tone also included your tone, you know, was huge. And I think more moments like that in so many different ways will make a big difference, right? And so I can appreciate that, and I'm glad you shared that. Let me ask you this, Samira. When you think about visual arts, and we had this conversation in part 1, tell us about some of the experiences you've had in the visual arts, and you know, what's really been the expectation of you as a Black student in visual arts?
Yeah, so this is a really big part of my life, even outside of the school, when it comes to critiques about my work, because I make work about like my culture and also about the gritty fact about African American past and like the history of it all. And sometimes I could get pretty controversial with the topics. So when it comes to critiquing, I haven't had a true Black critiquer to critique my Black work in a full way. And every time I get critiqued by someone who is non-Black, I sense a hesitance. And it's not just from what I feel, it's from what I hear. All I hear is like, oh, it's good, nice, technical. But I try to add so much to my meeting. I want to hear more about what I could do with the works with my culture and stuff. So I just wish for more inclusion of like Black professors so we could have like more conversations with Black students so we don't feel so shy to speak on our work, but also we don't have to feel like, oh, we have to stick to our culture. Just like Kirsten said, we could work outside of it and not feel like we're intruding.
I listened to a conversation that Denzel Washington was having about why certain directors were picked for certain films and why we needed a Black director for a particular film he was on, or he was talking about. And one of the things he said it's culture. It's culture. And that is why, because we need a connectivity to the culture. And he gave the example of, you know, can you, if I said, show us what it's like when a warm or a hot pressing comb comes towards your head. Now, right, Dion smiled. She's like, wait, that's like danger, right? You're like, wait a minute, right? So when it's coming, and he did this this gesture, and he said, do you all know what that means from a cultural perspective? That means what? What does that mean, Dion?
Every time I hear it, I just I can't help but flash back to my childhood, like the night before school, getting started in the hot comb, just going through the hair, and you can just hear it straightening, and it's brings back memories.
And it's that dynamic. It's a culture conversation. So Amira, really thinking about someone being able to connect to your culture. And that's a conversation we've had. Dr. Allen and I have had that conversation specifically around, do we have enough representation when it comes to the art areas and the educators that our kids are talking to, faced with, and being groomed by? That is a huge conversation. And so please be aware that, knowing that there is an inequity in terms of the faculty and staff that you see every day while you show up to master your craft, we're aware, and they're acutely aware. And so we've been talking about that, and we understand that that is systemically an issue. That may not be an overnight issue, right? It's systemically an issue. We've talked about it in a very big and bold way. And so just want you to know, behind the scenes, we've had some real tough conversations, and that is one of them. So Jalen, let me ask you this. You represent the Mariachi Art Department. And so tell us what that is like and what your experiences have been as a minority in that space, and what your connection is to your peers in the art area.
Well, I feel like for my art department, it's kind of different just because my department is solely based on minorities. Like, it's nothing but minorities compared to like theater or vocal, where you might be one of the only Black students in it. But when it comes to like HSPVA, like life and culture as a whole, I do know I am trying my best to diversify our own student council, because I have lost the election when I ran for student council president, and I was basically campaigning that I want to change the space because our student council was not representative of like our student body as a whole. We did not have a lot of artists. We did not have a lot of creative writers, jazz, mariachi. And when it comes to witnessing biases towards like Black and the Latino students, they were excluded from student council as well. And the few Black students who we do have, they're all mixed and we're light-skinned. There's no dark-skinned Black people, and that's a problem. So it's like, it's not why we don't have any Black students in student council. It's like, why do we not have any Black students in student council?
Jalen, you've uncovered a bit of a rock, and we hadn't talked about this at all. So we're going to wrap after this statement, but I want to say this. I think that's a huge piece for us to bring to the table. And Jalen, I'm personally going to be looking to you to really raise the flag on that and really let us walk together on that. And so having representation in your student clubs, in your associations, in your, the organizations that are designed to enhance your educational experience, that's huge. And I applaud you for being brave enough to say that. We know that we have representation from all of our student clubs that will be taking a look at this video and catching us live now. And I want you all to know that I'll be going back to study your feedback tonight and really want to make sure that we bring forward the real issues you've lifted, the things that we'll talk about as we go forward. I'll be connecting to you all in a more significant way as we move forward. And one of the things I'm proud of, and I'm gonna put this plug out here, our hashtag tonight is #ChangeAtPVA. So make sure you're using that as you're tagging and sharing these videos and our live stream. Make sure that you're doing that. We want to trend. We can trend tonight. There are enough of us to make sure that we trend. And then #ChangeAtPVA, which was the hashtag that you all decided on was going to make this live. What I want to share also is that I am excited that we have the Black Legacy in the Arts committee that will be on campus, and that is a parent committee, and we are excited to bring that forward and really give even more context and scope to the organization that is designed to create the inclusive and culturally connected experiences for our students. So I want to say that to you, that you have a champion in me and you have a champion in our leadership, and I'm going to bring Dr. Allen back on. And I want to thank you all in a tremendous way for fantastic, phenomenal work tonight. Thank you so much. Dr. Allen, anything you want to say before our students exit the stage?
I've been writing the whole time they were talking. You guys are amazing. And Jalen, let me just say that these are open conversations and we have to be honest if we're going to bring about change. And so as far as repercussions, if you feel like that's something that's happened, you need to let me know that, because all of our teachers care about you and we need to bring about change, and that's not something that's acceptable. So I don't want any of you to worry that you were honest and open and brave enough to talk with us tonight, that there would be consequences to that. So that is not something that is okay. And another thing that I wrote was just Dion said, you know, it's the little things that matter. And it was the example you gave. It's something that, to me as an adult, that you're right. It's the little things that matter, and we've got to be more conscious of those. So you guys, thank you. And this is just the beginning of a huge conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Dr. Allen and I are going to wrap up this conversation tonight. For all of you that are watching and for all of you that have been brave enough to join, to comment, your feedback will be reviewed and read and appreciated now. Thank you for stepping up and letting our students know just how bold and brave they are. And thank you. I saw a comment from the chair of our Black Alumni Network, Denise Ward, stating that she's so proud. And she also made a statement that the student council used to be one of the most diverse spaces. And so I think with enough understanding on the how and the why, we'll get back to that place, Denise. And we know we have a champion in you as well. And Dr. Allen, you know, conversations like this don't happen because one of us had a bright idea. They happen because all of us came together to bring this forward. And so we have some incredible people that we should be thanking tonight for making this come together. Aside from our incredible technical crew, I didn't have to apologize one time for a technicality, and we were phenomenally done tonight. So thank you to our technical crew and to Mr. Klein. I'll go ahead and get that one out of the way, but I will lean on you if you want to kick off the thank you.
Well, lots of thank yous. First of all, we had many different students who applied to be on the panel, and we just didn't have room to include everyone. We know who you are, lots of courageous young people at PVA. So thank you for being bold and stepping up for that. I do want to thank the HSPVA staff, and faculty and staff, Rebecca Harrison, Rhonda Pelton. Mr. Landry is behind the scenes right now working, making sure that this is all impressive. And I will say that while I was watching backstage, it was pretty impressive. So thank you, Mr. Landry. And Mr. Klein has been just a driving force in this. And so thank you to him. And you already mentioned Denise Ward, but you know, her heart is with HSPVA. And as an alum, she brings so much to the conversation. And the last thing that I would say is to our seniors who just graduated, you know, when all of this kind of got into motion in May and the beginning of June, they were the ones that reached out and were willing to share their stories. And at times I was a little shocked by the things that they had to say, but then I was, that's what motivated that we had to do some changing. And so to the seniors who graduated, you may have moved on to another adventure, but I feel like you made a difference in the future for students at HSPVA. So thank you to them.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that in that way. And I think what someone may be asking is the why. And I know we've had this heightened awareness of, you know, the microaggressions and all the things that we've been faced with the inequalities and the police brutality and the death and the killings. And I think that was the thing that we needed to acknowledge first, is that our kids are having the conversation. Our students are having the conversation, whether they have it with us or have it behind the scenes. Social media feeds are flooded with dialogue that is absolutely vibrant and brave and bold. And some of it it needs guidance and it needs direction. And one of the things we were committed to was showing our students how to have conversations that can create and impact change, and let us be a part of the next movement. Let us be a part of the forward motion. And so conversations like this, Dr. Allen, my hat is tipped to you as well for being brave enough to be a principal, an administrator of one of the greatest schools in this state of Texas, to actually bring this forward and to be a trailblazer in that space. So I, as a parent, and I, as a committee member, and representing now our engagement team, Rebecca Harrison and I, we will be boots on the ground, making sure that we help influence and enhance the access to HSPVA for minority students, literally all over the greater Houston area. So HSPVA is a place where diversity and culture is a conversation that we're willing to have, and we're willing to make the change. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kyra, and thank you for facilitating tonight. I think that you did a great job, and the kids obviously had words that were very important to be heard. I want to thank everyone who joined us, whether you're joining us live or if you're watching it later, because it will be recorded and posted on our website for people to stream and watch. This is just the beginning, as I said earlier, and so more conversations, surveys, gathering input from parents and from students and from former students, alum, just to figure out what are the priorities and what do we need to do better at HSPVA. So I expect you guys to hold us accountable as we move forward. But as long as I'm the principal, I can tell you that we are going to do better. And I look forward to the journey, and I look forward to keeping the stakeholders updated in our decisions as we move forward. So I appreciate you guys being with us tonight. I hope you have a good evening, and we can't wait to see our students on Tuesday morning for our first day of school. Be it virtual, we're still going to see our kids. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.